Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me today on another episode of the show, Podcast Unfiltered. Your support means so much, and it's because of you that this show continues. If this is your first time coming across this show, I'm glad that you're here. We would love for you to become a part of this community. Please subscribe to this channel in the button below and drop your comments as well as your thoughts and ideas on how we can advance democracy and good governance on the continent of Africa. The year 2026 is proving to be a very, very interesting year. Hardly is the year 2 weeks old, and we've seen massive protests on the streets of Iran. Hundreds of thousands of people who have poured out to protest and demand for a change in government. Unfortunately, protesters have been met with violence by government and security agents, with hundreds of people reportedly killed. In Africa, the first election that will take place on the continent this year is currently underway in Uganda. Early reports suggest widespread delays, arrest of party agents, as well as malfunctioning machines, and low voter turnout. Unfortunately, events leading to the Uganda elections did not give much hope to cheer that this election will be in any way credible. There have been arrests of civil society activists. There's been the closure of hundreds of civil society organizations just some few days before the election. So we wait to see how the process plays out, whether we will see a return to power. Incumbent President Yoweri Museveni, who has been in power for more than 40 years, or there will be a major change in Uganda if the opposition candidate, Bobby Wine, happens to make a dent in today's election. The chances, I must say, are quite remote. And before I move away from the topic of Uganda, I will once again want to join my voice in asking for the unconditional release of the detained activist, Sarah Birete. Free Sarah Birete now. Now, as Nigeria moves deeper into 2026, the countdown to the 2027 general elections has effectively begun. But this conversation is not really about 2027. It's about now. Because elections are not won or lost on election day. They are shaped months and years before the first ballot is cast. Nigeria heads into this electoral cycle with serious questions hanging in the air. Unresolved controversies from the 2023 elections, a new leadership at the Independent National Electoral Commission, as well as growing fears of elite consolidation into the dominant ruling All Progressive parties, and worsening security issues that threaten voter participation across large parts of the country. So the big question is, can Nigeria restore trust in its electoral process, or are we drifting towards elections without credibility? To help us unpack these issues and many more, I'm joined today by Barrister Festus Okoye, former INEC National Commissioner, a legal practitioner, a civil rights activist, and one of the most informed voices on Nigeria's electoral system. We are going to assess INEC's performance in 2023. We'll examine what must change before the 2027 election and ask whether 2026 is the real test for Nigeria's democratic future. As I welcome to the studio our guest for the day, Barrister Festus Okoye. Joining us today on the show. I must say that it's not every day that one gets lucky to find someone with your knowledge, experience, and to speak to us on a show like this. So thank you for making the time.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Now, let me start with the big picture. You were until very recently, I guess, even up till the through the 2023 elections, you were a national commissioner with the Independent National Electoral Commission. But beyond that, also, you were such a key member in the Uwais Electoral Reform Committee panel. That was before you were appointed into INEC. So let me ask you, from your vantage point, how would you describe events in Nigeria leading towards the 2027 elections?
Well, the political situation in Nigeria as of today is very fluid. The 2026 will really be a defining moment in Nigeria's electoral trajectory. Our hope and our prayer is that all the key political actors within this particular trajectory will do their work, remain within the ambit and parameters of their defined and assigned role, and make sure that Nigerians have a good electoral experience as we approach 2027. So Nigerians are very, very hopeful, but that hope has to be tempered with the current realities on the ground, especially the realities around rising poverty, realities around people's loss of interest in the electoral process, and also rising the reality surrounding some of the countries within the West African sub-region, where anti-democratic forces have reversed the gains recorded by democracy recently. So this expectation and this anticipation has to be moderated in order for us not to lose hope in the process of democracy and the gains of democracy.
All right, thank you for that. So my follow-up question then, since you just said that developments in 2026 will be very pivotal to how 2027 really shapes out for Nigeria electorally. So my question is, to what extent do you think controversies from the 2023 elections, of which you were a principal actor from the side of election administration, how do you think that continue to shape public trust and confidence in election administration in Nigeria? Do you think that people have recovered and issues from the 2023 elections, in your opinion, do you feel they've been sufficiently addressed in such a way to encourage Nigerians to really take up the opportunity and participate in the next election?
Well, let me be very honest and let me be very, very frank. For the 2023 general election, the Independent National Electoral Commission prepared well. The first thing the commission did was to expand polling units in Nigeria from 119,974 to 176,846. This he did by converting what we call the voting points, that we had 57,023 voting points. We converted them into polling units. So we expanded the base of the polling units in Nigeria. Secondly, the commission removed the existing polling units from shrines and from inappropriate places and moved them to schools and other public locations. And that was key in terms of making sure that polling units are accessible. Not only that, the commission introduced the INEC voter enrollment device, through which so many of our compatriots were registered as voters. When we came in as an electoral management body, the total registered voter population in Nigeria was 84 million. After we introduced the INEC voter enrollment device, we expanded the voter registration from 84 million to 93 million. And this was also very key. Not only that, the commission also participated actively and made very serious input into the amendments to the Electoral Act. And if you look at the Electoral Act, you can see that the Electoral Act was reenacted, and that was key to a very good electoral process. Now, if you recall, the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria signed the Electoral Act on the 25th day of February 2022. On the next day, being the 26th day of February 2022, the Independent National Electoral Commission released the timetable and schedule of activities for the election. That shows that we were prepared, and we were prepared well for the election. We also retired the smart card reader and introduced the bimodal voter accreditation system, which deals with not only fingerprint but with facial identification. And this retired those who were trading in voters' cards, and also made accreditation less painful and very, very easy. We also introduced what we call the INEC result viewing portal, thereby making polling unit results accessible to Nigerians so that they can see what is going on at the level of the polling unit. So the commission prepared well. Of course, there were challenges, and nobody will overlook those challenges. One of those challenges was that between 2019 and 2022, the commission faced over 50 attacks in its facilities in 15 states of the Federation. Ballot boxes were destroyed, buildings were destroyed, INEC materials were damaged, and so on and so forth. But we recovered from all these attacks. Now, building up to the election also, we had what you call the central bank currency swap. And if you recall, some of the transporters, you have to pay them cash because they were not banked. You know, that created challenges for us. The fuel scarcity at that period also created challenges for the Independent National Electoral Commission. But we were prepared to overcome some of these challenges. Now, in terms of the confidence in the electoral process, I want to say this and say it publicly, that one of the biggest challenges the commission had was the rise of social media and the spread of false information and narratives. This posed a huge challenge to the Independent National Electoral Commission. Secondly, some sections of the social media claim that the beavers that we introduced for voter accreditation and authentication was an electronic voting machine and was going to transmit the results of the elections electronically. We faced that particular challenge. Some social media influencers also created all sorts of narratives that were not true, and we couldn't counter them. But the biggest challenge we faced was the challenge we faced in uploading the presidential election results. All the other results were uploaded to IREV. It was only the presidential election results that was not uploaded, and this created image problem for the commission and also created very, very serious challenges for the commission.
Yeah, I'm glad you went there, Barrister Okoye. I was in Nigeria for the election in 2023, the presidential election, and even the elections that took place after that. Everyone concedes that the last commission introduced a lot of innovation. INEC promised so much, and you in particular was the most known face for the commission, aside from the chairman. And you're a man of credibility, someone I've known many years ever before you got into the INEC board. Now, I think we're having an honest conversation here. You've reeled out a litany of the good things the commission did, but the cardinal sin is on this issue of result transmission, result display. I don't think there's been enough explanation to Nigerians what really happened. Why is it that it worked for other elections and it did not work for the presidential election? That cloud of lack of accountability still rests on that election. What really happened?
Well, you know, this particular matter went before the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal. The then Deputy Director of INEC in charge of ICT offered all the explanations he could offer before the Presidential Election Tribunal. And he was cross-examined on all aspects of the issues which he raised. Now, this issue involves technology. Basically and fundamentally, I'm a lawyer. The chairman is a historian. So technology can disappoint you at any point in time. What happened was that in terms of upload of presidential election results, technology disappointed. And those in charge of technology at that point in time have offered the explanation to Nigerians. Now, the critical issue was that the commission made it very clear that the INEC result viewing portal is not a collation system, and that the commission created the INEC result viewing portal for purposes of public accountability, to give Nigerians a sense, to allow Nigerians participate in what is going on at the level of the polling units, just to be transparent, but that it is not part of the collation system. If you recall, all the political parties were asked to nominate polling agents for all the polling units. And as you are aware, the commission has a total of 176,000 polling units, 176,846 polling units. Now, political parties nominated polling agents. In other words, they had polling agents in almost all the polling units. The APC, for instance, nominated a total of 176,223 polling agents. The Labour Party nominated and had accreditation for 134,874, while the PDP had accreditation for 176,588 polling agents. This is at the level of the polling units. At the level of collation, they also had polling agents, collation agents. At the level of National Collation Center, they also had collation agents. So primarily, they had agents in the units and had primary results from the polling units. So if there was a problem with the IREV system, they had the primary results from the polling units. But that does not obviate the fact that there was problem with uploading of the presidential election results. And that inability to upload the presidential election results more or less dented the good work and all the preparations the Independent National Electoral Commission made towards that election. No person complained that the beavers didn't work, because both domestic and international election observers affirmed the fact that for purposes of accreditation and authentication, that the beavers worked. People did not complain that election materials arrived late at the polling units, because election materials arrived at the designated polling units on time. The only issue was the uploading of the presidential election results. And I believe that those who understand technology went to the presidential election petition tribunal and explained what happened with the upload of the presidential election results.
All right, Barrister Okoye, you know, election is not technology per se. Elections are political events.
Yes.
And the reason why the country seemed not to have moved from 2023, that spot after, you know, the results were announced, is because we're treating a political issue as a technology problem. And so my question really is, in your, you know, from your assessment and from what you know, do you think INEC was sufficiently insulated from political interference in 2023?
You see, the Independent National Electoral Commission is a big institution. We have office in the national headquarters. Then we have offices in the 36 states of the Federation and the Federal Capital Territory. We also have offices in the 774 local governments and area councils. And then we also have clusters of offices in the 8,809 registration areas or wards. Now, in total, the commission has less than 15,000 permanent staff. So for the purposes of election, for the purposes of conducting election, it is Nigerians that conduct election. For the 2023 general election, the commission deployed over 1.5 million ad hoc staff to conduct this election, made up of presiding officers and assistant presiding officers. We also deployed collation officers to the 8,809 registration areas and to the various local governments to collect the results of elections. Now, the presiding officers in the 176,000 polling units in Nigeria are youth corps members serving the nation, while most of the assistant presiding officers are students of federal tertiary institutions in their penultimate year. So we were managing an election conducted by over 1.5 million ad hoc staff. And this 1.5 million ad hoc staff are not staff of the Independent National Electoral Commission. Most of the supervisory presiding officers are also staff of federal commissions and federal parastatals, and they are not staff of the commission. The collation officers in the 8,809 registration areas are lecturers and professors from federal tertiary institutions, so they are not staff of the commission. So the truth of the matter is that the 12 national commissioners and the chairman only sit in the office on election day and watch what is going on television. The resident electoral commissioners, or most of the resident electoral commissioners in the 36 states and the Federal Capital Territory, sit in their office and watch what is going on in the out there in the field. So the managing directors of elections, in terms of elections, are the 774 electoral officers in the various local governments. So the issue of political interference, the issue of you must make this person governor, or you must send this person to the National Assembly, does not even arise, because on election day, you are conducting presidential elections and you are conducting elections for 103 Senate House in 103 senatorial districts and 360 federal constituencies. So you don't have time, and you don't have the opportunity to
Barrister Okoye, I'm sorry to butt in.
Yes.
You know, based on the work you and I have done over the years, yes. You know, at some level I've been involved in election in Nigeria.
I'm aware.
At least, and some of the things you've said here are the same problems that or challenges that we keep hearing of. That, you know, INEC has X number of staff, you know, who are permanent staff, and then we have, you know, that many number of staff who are basically ad hoc staff. I mean, tell me, maybe this is something I don't know. Aside from the innovation that we saw during the Jega administration that introduced, you know, university lecturers into as part of the ad hoc staff, you know, just to ensure a level of accountability and, you know, trust in results declared. Where have things really broken down in terms of how the permanent secretariat of INEC manages all these people? How is INEC innovating in a way to ensure that this, you know, motley crowd of ad hoc staff that is recruited left, right, and center, to ensure that those people don't compromise, you know, they don't dilute the outcome of the election? Because come 2027, INEC is still going to recruit. No one is going to say INEC will go and recruit permanent staff of, you know, over 1 million, if they don't even have that kind of resource. So this problem keeps reoccurring. And on election day, we hear that the chairman is only there in the office and so on. What is the role of monitors? How can INEC, you know, create structures to ensure that those people who have been saddled with this critical assignment don't compromise the system?
Now, I want to salute those young men and women serving the nation who volunteer to serve as presiding officers and assistant presiding officers. So these people go to polling units that are in very difficult terrain. Some of them have to be on the high seas for 2 or 3 hours to get to their polling units. I know some polling units in places like Cross River where we had to hire human carriers to take people up the hills. Some of these young men and women serve in these places. Some of them serve in polling units that are almost in the forest, and they take all sorts of risk. Now, the challenge is this. These young men and women, some of them are still in school. You deploy them to some of these difficult terrain. Now, more often than not, the political elite, rather than leave the political space for free, fair, and transparent elections, they go and hire talks. They create an atmosphere of fear and tension on election day. Sometimes they prevent some of these young men and women from even accessing the polling units where they have been deployed to. Sometimes when some of them access the polling units where they are deployed to, violence is unleashed on them. And our policy is that when your life is in danger, play along. And more often than not, their lives are in danger. I know of situations, and I've seen situations where whole polling units were sacked, where whole constituencies were sacked by political talks. So for me, INEC will not absolve itself of responsibility and will not absolve itself of some of these challenges. But the truth of the matter is that we can only achieve free, fair, and transparent elections in a conducive atmosphere when the political elite in Nigeria are ready for democracy and when they imbibe what I call the democratic spirit. As of today, they have not imbibed the democratic spirit and they have not agreed and believed that the ordinary people of this country, the voters, are the repository of authority, that they are the repository of knowledge, and that it is their responsibility to go and vote for candidates of their choice. Rather, on election day, in some polling units, in some constituencies, in some local governments, political talks don't even allow the voters to get near the polling units. And when the voters get near the polling units, at the end of the day, they either destroy the polling materials, carry ballot papers, carry ballot boxes, or maim and even kill some of the people. So we have a huge challenge with some of these issues. So I think that security agencies must realize that their main duty is to the nation and not to the political parties. If security agencies police and police well, if security agencies are able to make the environment less violence prone, Nigerians will identify with democracy and carry out their civil responsibilities without fear or hindrance.
All right, thank you. So still one more question before we move away from 2023 election. Out there, the National Commissioner in charge of voter education, but how damaging do you think was INEC's post-election communication strategy to public confidence, and how do you think that can be fixed? Because, and you tell me also if you believe whether INEC overpromised and under-delivered in that election.
In terms of our communication strategy, I don't think that there was anything wrong with our communication strategy. We communicated in the manner we needed to communicate, and we also communicated based on the resources available to the Independent National Electoral Commission. But I think with the benefit of hindsight, we should have invested more on the social media. Of course, we cannot compete effectively with those on the social media, but at least we should have tried to dominate the social media and offered our own explanation. Rather, we allowed those who were chasing clout, we allowed social media influencers to take over the social media, and most of the information they were giving out on social media were not correct information. Most of the things they were promising the people and claiming that we promised, we are not the things we promised. So for me, going forward, one of the things that should be done is to review the INEC communication strategy and impute social media strategies into that communication strategy, and not allow those who are chasing clout and those who are looking for, who are trying to drive traffic to their sites to take over the communication strategies of the Independent National Electoral Commission. Because more often than not, and some of these people, some of them have never seen the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria before. They have not seen the Electoral Act before. They don't know about the regulations and guidelines of the Independent National Electoral Commission. They just sell dummy to the Nigerian people. And so many people, especially younger people, went to the social media, relied on the social media for their information. And some of the information they got from the social media were not correct information. So I think that should be corrected.
Okay, thank you for that. So let's look forward now. We have a new chairman of INEC in person of Professor Amukwito. who just assumed office, he's had his own baptism of fire with special elections that took place recently. But from your position of being an insider in the past, if you were advising the new INEC chairman today, what are the top 3 lessons from 2023 that, that must not be repeated in 2027? What would be your advice? Top 3.
Well, I think that he should learn on the job. He should learn on the job. But my first advice is that the new leadership must listen to and consider public opinion while remaining firmly within the boundaries and scope of the law and the Constitution. That's one. My second advice will be that the Commission should be proactive in traditional and social media and must not allow social media influencers to dictate the narratives of the electoral process. And my third advice will be that the Commission should try as much as possible to audit its local government operations and make sure that all the electoral officers who have stayed in one place for 2 electoral cycles are transferred. This should be my 3 top advice to the new INEC chairman.
All right, thank you. And I think that takes me to questions around institutional reform, because beyond personalities and the political issues that that we've discussed. So what structural or legal reforms do you think are urgently needed, to strengthen INEC's credibility? I know you wrote in the Daily Telegraph just some few days ago where you did an analysis of, top end issues in the new electoral, not new yet, it's still electoral reform bill. And you did touch on this vexed issue of the appointment of resident electoral commissioners, which till date still remains, at the discretion of the president, and they are not in any way, they can be disciplined by the board of the commission. So maybe I'm taking that as one of the early legal reform or institutional reform that you may want to suggest. But where are those? What are those legal as well as institutional reforms that you think INEC should pursue? The window is closing, gradually, because by this time we've not seen the timetable in any case. But if the past is anything to go by, we have roughly about 11 months or so before the next round of elections. Over to you, sir.
Now, there is nothing fundamentally wrong with the constitutional framework, and there's nothing fundamentally wrong with the legal framework for elections. What is wrong is that as of today, the political parties, the aspirants, the candidates have not agreed that democracy is the best form of government for Nigeria. They are yet to agree that in terms of the electoral process, that the overriding consideration should be the interest of the voters in choosing whoever they want. That is the big issue. Now, some of the amendments being proposed to the constitution and the electoral framework as things that will only enhance the conduct of free, fair, and transparent elections. But even with the current Electoral Act 2022, you can conduct free, fair, and transparent elections. Now, but to build more confidence in the electoral system, the Electoral Reform Committee of 2007-2008, of which I was a member, had proposed that rather than have the post of resident electoral commissioners, that what we should have are directors of election who can be disciplined by the commission. Because as of today, if the commission has a challenge with any resident electoral commissioner, the commission cannot remove that resident electoral commissioner. It is the prerogative of the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria to even discipline and dismiss that resident electoral commissioner. If you recall, We had challenges with the resident electoral commissioner for Adamawa State. I had to go back to Adamawa State to go and conclude the governorship election in Adamawa State. It was only when this current president came that he was removed from office, because the commission does not have the power to remove him from office. So I believe that that is one of the issues that should also be considered. As of today, the creation of an electoral offences commission is still incorrect. The bill is still before the National Assembly, and they have been dragging on it. I believe that we need an independent and autonomous electoral offences commission to deal with some of the myriad issues around our elections. The Electoral Reform Committee also recommended the creation of a political parties registration and regulatory commission. If you do that, you remove political parties away from the electoral management body, so that the electoral management body will now concentrate solely on the conduct of elections. But you have factions in a political party. You invite one faction to a meeting, the other faction say you have taken sides. So I think that one of the issues I have canvassed is that rather than getting involved in the internal and factional issues of political parties, that the electoral management body should remain within the compass of its irregulatory framework and allow the political parties to go and resolve their own internal issues. If they can't resolve it, it's their problem. The commission can also deregister them if they cannot resolve their issues. So some of these are the germane issues that are still before the National Assembly. But I believe that with or without a new electoral legal framework, we can conduct free, fair, and transparent elections with the existing legal framework. If the political parties, if the political elite are committed to democracy, democratic processes, and democratic values.
Yeah, I mean, there's even concern that the Nigeria election law is almost like, the constant reform, changes. Not that those changes are not important, but it's almost being rendered to like a document that people can just play around with, So while reforms are needed, we wonder whether it's every 4 years that we must be having a whole scale change. So in a way, I think I agree with you, not undermining or playing down the amendment that has been passed and waiting for the president's assent. Let's move on to campaigns, which I think in a way is already on. The stakes are high, especially for 2027. What practical ideas do you think INEC and political parties can take, starting now, to reduce incidences of violence? Right now, we're grateful that there are no reports of, violence. It's been more of brickbats over the media. But who knows, still warning signs for us. So how do you think INEC, security agencies, as well as political parties, what practical steps can they take now to reduce incidences of election-related violence?
Violence in election has its own dynamics. People do not unleash violence in areas where they believe they are strong. Now, the big issue we now have is what I call the lack of ideological foundation in any of the political parties in Nigeria. If you look at Section 224 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, it pigeonholes all the political parties in Nigeria into one ideological framework. So, what we have as of today in most of the political parties, or in all the political parties, are just an aggregation of individuals who have the viable platform to contest elections. So it's not about ideology. So based on that, you can see the migration towards one political platform. Now, what is going to happen is that things will become clear during the political party primaries. where people are migrating to, if they conduct their primaries transparently, if they conduct their primaries in accordance with their constitution, if they conduct the primaries in accordance with their own guidelines, if they conduct the primaries in accordance with their own regulations, we may not have huge challenges in Nigeria. But if they undermine their own legal framework in the conduct of the primaries, then they will bolster other political parties, and the stage may be set for a huge political contest. Now, for me, if the political parties believe in democracy, we are not going to have challenges. If they believe that the ordinary people of Nigeria are the ones who have been vested with the power of the vote, we won't have problems. But if they believe that they can snatch power through unorthodox means, through violence, through intimidation, and through coercion, then we are going to have problems. Now, the big issue, the loser in all these things will not be any of the political parties or any of the aspirants or any of the candidates. The big loser will be democracy. Because the moment the ordinary people believe that the leadership that are out there are not the leadership they elected or the leadership they would have wanted, democracy suffers a recession. And based on what is going on within the West African sub-region, we are not going to allow democracy to suffer a recession in this country, because we fought for this democracy. Some of the people in power today, some of the political elite in power today, have never fought for democracy, did not live under military regime, did not fight for democracy. So when they're carrying out certain actions that undermine democracy, they don't know what they're doing. So we cannot allow democracy to suffer, because I, for one, I was in solitary confinement during the military regime. I suffered untold hardship during the military regime.
Yeah.
So some of us who fought for democracy will not allow to undermine what we fought for, because we know the values of democracy and we know what we suffered and went through during the military regime. So we can't allow them to undermine this democracy.
Yeah. I mean, some of us are still blaming people of your generation, because you fought in the trenches and you abandoned it to them, and here we are today, and we are on the outside trying to keep, it go better, as we say. All right. The other question I have for you has to do with the role of civil society, since we're actually there now. So much is demanded from civil society. We want them to hold government accountable, but because ultimately they are the ones who will benefit if things go well, or they will be the ones that will suffer when things don't go well, just as you explained on how we have to fight for this democracy that we fought for before we have. So what role do you see for civil society? You are a veteran of election observation, from the civil society end. What are the new innovations that civil society needs to come up with, rather, for the 2027 election, as well as the media, civil society and media?
The face of civil society in Nigeria has changed.
Yeah.
And we must recognize the changing face of civil society groups in Nigeria. For me, civil society groups and organizations must focus on democracy and oversee the democratic processes and practices. They should closely monitor the health of democracy. If they delay till 2027, anti-democratic forces maintain the electoral environment, leaving little to observe. For us, within the civil society ring, to do this effectively, we must have knowledge of the constitutional framework of the country. We must have knowledge of the legal framework of the country. We must have knowledge of the rules and regulations of the electoral management body. We must also know this country well, know the political dynamics in each state of the federation, know where the challenges are, know where we have had challenges and problems before. But more fundamentally for me is that if we must be civil society, we must remain non-partisan. In other words, we cannot align with any political party, we cannot align with any aspirant, we cannot align with any candidate. So even if a candidate is from your own family, you must remain focused and independent. Even if the candidate espouses the same religious ideology with you, you must remain firm and independent. Even if a candidate is from your own, you must remain firm and independent. And that is a huge challenge. And that was one of the big challenges we had with the 2023 general election. A few of the members of civil society lost their heads because of some candidates and dived into the political arena without minding the fact that there are supposed to be civil society groups and they are supposed to be non-partisan and they are supposed to be independent. So for me, the independence of civil society is key. The non-partisanship of civil society is key. Knowledge of civil society groups and organizations, especially the leaders, will remain key in the political process because the ordinary people will look up to civil society groups and organizations for direction and for organization as we move towards the 2027 election. The same thing with the media. Because for me, a journalist without electoral knowledge and who goes to elections is a danger to democracy. It's a danger to democracy. Yes, I recognize the fact that there are issues of media ownership and that some of the owners of the media are in the political arena. Some of them own political parties and some are big wigs in political parties. But that does not obviate the fact that the media has a role to play in the sustenance of democracy and also in political education. So I believe that all journalists must remain within the ambit and confines of their journalistic ethics and operate professionally, and so that at the end of the day, democracy will be the winner in elections. Because if democracy fails, all of us will be the losers. People have seen what happens in societies where people are in IDP camps, where people have gone on exile. No, if anything happens to democracy in Nigeria, the entire West African sub-region will feel the impact. The entire West African sub-region will be the loser in this situation. So we should care about the health of our democracy and care less about our own personal gains and our own personal ambition.
All right. Well, thank you so much. As we come to the end of the interview, I want you to talk to Nigerians. You know, what is one message that you have for Nigerian voters who feel elections in Nigeria no longer matter? I know out of the 36 states, you know, plus FCT, and we have about 28 governors who are all under the umbrella or under the broom of APC now. And, you know, perhaps by the time this interview is over, there will be another governor that would have aligned with the APC. And, you know, I don't see much whether APC, ADC, or even Labour, they are all the same. But what message do you have for Nigerian voters who feel that, look, our votes don't matter anymore?
Nigerians should not lose faith in democracy. Democracy is not the problem in Nigeria. The problem in Nigeria has to do with those we have entrusted with the power to pilot the affairs of this country. Nigerians have wholeheartedly embraced democracy. Democracy is not a 100-meter dash. Democracy has to be worked on. It has to be nurtured. Democracy has to be pampered. So, as we make incremental changes in our electoral process, Nigerians must never lose faith, but remain engaged with democracy, especially with the younger members of our country. Some of them have been glamorizing military rule. Some of them have been glamorizing what is going on in some West African countries. I want to tell them that those things that are going on in some of in some West African countries are not sustainable, and that there is no alternative to living in a democracy, because democracy offers opportunities for free speech. It offers you opportunities for freedom of association, and also offers you endless other possibilities, no matter how warped our democracy is. So let us work on our democracy. Let us use the power and the energy of the younger members of the society to advance our democracy. Yes, democracy will come with its own hiccups. It will come with all its own disappointments. But if we remain engaged and work on it, there is no doubt that one day we will be proud of the work we have done, and we'll also be proud that we have a democratic system of government in place. And other countries will also be proud of us and refer to Nigeria as a stable democracy. So we must never give up. We must remain stable with our democracy, and we must keep on working on our democracy, because there is no alternative to democracy and democratic governance and democratic practices.
Yeah, I say complete amen to that. And that dream of when Nigeria's democracy, our elections and everything will be a very positive role model for the rest of the continent and the world. That's my dream also. I really want to see it, that Nigeria's democracy advances. All right, I know you said the new INEC chairman should learn on the job. But I'm not going to let you go easy on that. If you had just 1 minute with the new INEC chairman and even the board, what would you tell them from your own experience? What would you tell them?
I will tell them to have their eyes on the ball, remain within the bounds and ambit of the Constitution and the law, and do what they believe is right for the people of this country, and do what they believe will advance the electoral process and Nigerian democracy.
Thank you so much, Barrister Festus Okoye. Really appreciate the insights you've shared with us today. I hope when we come knocking another time, you will oblige us. You are a man of rich experience. If I should ask, since you've exited INEC, are you still going to be involved in election administration, election organization in any shape or form?
Definitely. In terms of the amendments to the Electoral Act, I'm one of the technical advisors to the National Assembly, and I'm also following the issue of constitutional amendment closely. I'm reading, I'm writing, and I'm also involved in civil society work. So, and I'm a lawyer, if you know. So
I can see your gap behind you there.
We are engaged in this process. We are not ceding the platform to anybody. We are going to remain engaged with democracy. We are going to remain engaged with civil society, and we're also going to remain engaged with constitutional and electoral reforms in Nigeria.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate the honor and the time. So that is it. It's been such a wonderful time with Barrister Festus Okoye, a man whom I can call Mr. Elections, particularly when it comes to election administration and jurisprudence in Nigeria. Several issues that he has raised with us today. But what is key in some of the things he has said is that democracy is a patient process, and it has to be nurtured. It has to be pampered. There is no alternative to democracy if the goal is for us to have good governance and development. It's also important for us to know, and for the audience to know, with regards to the 2027 Nigeria elections, that the elections are not going to be fought and won in 2027. The process starts now. There's so much focus on what APC is doing or what ADC is doing, who is defecting from which party to the other. But what is key for civil society is for us to begin to ask the critical questions, ask questions that will strengthen and enhance accountability and credibility of the elections. Ask of that from the INEC, from the Independent National Electoral Commission. Put the new chairman and the board of INEC to task, put their feet to the fire. We should have a standards of demand as citizens of Nigeria, what we expect the election administration to deliver on. what we expect political parties to do in terms of their campaign promises. What do they want to offer? It is not just important that a governor defects from one party to the ruling party, or those who feel disaffected within the ruling party move to what they call opposition coalition. The question is, what are you going to deliver? And it's not just what are you going to deliver, how do you intend to do it? I think that is what is key for Nigerians. That is what Nigerians are demanding. We have suffered so long, and it is time for Nigeria to really achieve its full potentials. Thank you once again for joining us today on this show. And if you have stayed this long and you've not subscribed to this channel, hey, please join this community. Subscribe in the link below. Join this community, share your thoughts, share your ideas, and comment to this episode. Thank you once again, and until the next episode, stay blessed. God bless Nigeria.